Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Orr. I'm from Stillwater Sciences, and I'm here today to talk about a pilot study my co-authors and other collaborators and I have been conducting to test various methods for improving monitoring of riparian habitat restoration performance at multiple scales. As always, this is a team effort. A lot of different people were involved, and the primary funding was provided by Valley Water. This pilot study is focused on the Guadalupe River in San Jose, California, in the heart of Silicon Valley. And since 1994, a variety of restoration and mitigation projects have been conducted on the river. And as part of the mitigation requirements, there are long-term adaptive management and monitoring requirements that need to be met with annual monitoring at a variety of these sites to test response in terms of riparian vegetation, recruitment, percent of native versus non-native cover, tree height and basal areas. But there are also a number of other aquatic and fisheries habitat related monitoring components we won't be talking about today. I'll focus just on a subset of the riparian vegetation aspects. Here's a blow up of the pilot study area. It's just a portion of the downtown project reach near downtown San Jose. And on the left here is a blow up showing the transects labeled from 1 through 44. These are the transects used in the pilot study. For representative purposes today, I'll be focusing mainly on the lower transect number 44. As mentioned, the adaptive management program requires monitoring annually at a variety of sites. On the vegetation components, there are short-term indicators such as plant survival, health, vigor, and recruitment. And there are longer-term indicators such as native versus non-native cover and riparian tree height and basal area. One of the challenges we faced after many years of doing fairly routine monitoring, in 2020, things changed. We had this combination of the worldwide pandemic, COVID-19, coupled with increased usage and distribution of human encampments along the riparian zone, coupled with threats from fire. Because of these safety hazards, over 25 to 30% of some of the monitoring sites were not able to be visited on the ground. This led us to initiate the pilot program to attempt to find alternative ways to gather data remotely that could be coupled with more limited field data collection to try to fill in the gaps and see if we could meet at least some of the requirements of long-term monitoring program. And an additional objective was to determine if using these remotely sensed data could help us extrapolate and expand from the site-specific transect data to more of a reach scale assessment of what's going on throughout the larger area. I'm sure all of you have heard a bit about LiDAR, or airborne laser mapping. We've talked a fair bit about it at this conference in recent years, including some of my prior talks. But typically in the past, we've talked mainly about use of LiDAR for generating a bare earth topographic surface or estimating canopy height. What I want to focus on today is more sophisticated use of LiDAR to assess three-dimensional structure of riparian vegetation. For the pilot study, we coupled field data collection along transects with the LiDAR data, and we used a line transect with circular plots established at regular intervals, basically a 10-foot radius circular plot established every 20 feet along the transect. And then the circular plot was extended vertically to create a cylindrical plot to get at a canopy density or canopy cover at different vertical layers. The understory, which is the less than 1 meter from the ground surface, the midstory, basically 1 to 3 meters, and the canopy, higher canopy layer, which is 3 meters and greater above the ground surface. We also looked at sort of total vegetative cover over the entire transect. And in the field, the amount of cover was differentiated between native and non-native species. But for the LiDAR transect analysis, we weren't able to differentiate species, let alone native versus non-native. Here's an example of some of the data. On the left is a multispectral image, this case color infrared, just showing a portion of transect 44 and some of those circular plots that were established along the transect. On the right is a plot of LiDAR laser return data, color-coded to show relative elevation or height above the ground surface. So the blue dots are those laser returns from at or near the ground surface, whereas the red ones are higher in the canopy, in this case 10 to 30 feet above the ground surface. Here's a representative image. Essentially, this is a virtual belt transect taken along the line transect here. And the point cloud data just presented in this cross-sectional view to give you a quick general representation of the structure that we were seeing from the LiDAR. And then this was the basis for comparison with the field data collection. Transects ran from west to east. And here you can see I've highlighted the river channel towards the center of the cross-section. Here's zooming in on that river channel just to show a little more detail. In this case, the LiDAR vendor classified the points and color-coded. They're color-coded here. Points in blue are indicating water surface of the channel. Points in red are those classified as ground surface. Points in gray are sort of near ground cover or understory layer. And then points in green are the main vegetative canopy. Next, I just wanted to give you a field photo and a comparison with the LiDAR cross-section to give you a sense of an area where the field and LiDAR comparison was working quite well. In this case, we have a relatively open riparian canopy, and at 30 feet point along the transect, the LiDAR data was doing a pretty good job of picking up the downwood and the racked tree limbs that you can see in the photo here. Should mention the photo and the cross-section don't align exactly, but the ovals give you a general area of comparison between the two. There was a sparse understory cover measured in the field at just 3%. You can see on the LiDAR image, there's really not much understory cover being picked up. Mid-story cover was about 20%, which looks about right if you look at the LiDAR image. And then the taller canopy cover was 80%. So you can see we have, here's an example of pretty good correspondence between the two. To get a better statistical analysis and correlation across all transects, we prepared these plots, and our statistician did an analysis to look at our square values. And on the left, you can see here's the distribution of points. On the left axis, the y-axis is the LiDAR estimate of canopy cover. On the x-axis is the field estimate of canopy cover. And you can see for the overstory layer, which is basically 1/2 foot to 3.28 feet or 0.15 to 1 meters, the LiDAR data tend to overpredict the amount of cover in this analysis. Mid-story layer, we also have a pretty low R-square. And in this example, you can see that the LiDAR is under-predicting the amount of mid-story canopy. And then over on the right, you can see the correlation between the LiDAR and the field estimates for the taller canopy cover at 3 meters and above. And there we have a good R-square, 0.74. And you can see on the plot that we have a pretty good correspondence. There's some scatter and noise, but LiDAR is doing a pretty good job of matching the field estimates. Just to go into this a little bit further, on the plot on the right, both these plots are looking at total canopy cover. The one on the left is looking at total canopy cover from 0.15 meters and above. Essentially, if you were laying on the ground looking up to the canopy, that's what you'd be seeing. R-square is 0.52, not bad, but not great either. The LiDAR tends to overpredict the cover. And then on the right, you can see total canopy cover from 1 meters and above. And in this case, we've got a better correlation and a tighter fit. So this gives us a sense of the LiDAR is doing pretty well, the higher layers in the canopy, and we're having some challenges as we get closer to the ground surface. Here's just a summary of what we're picking up. And next, here's just a reminder of where was the LiDAR not doing a good job of detecting conditions we were seeing on the ground. And in this case, I'll show you an example where it's the field observation showed a significant mid-story layer, whereas the LiDAR was not really picking that up well. Same with the backwater channel that was not picked up, apparently because it was covered by a dense willow thicket. And then we weren't able and didn't expect to be able to pick up and differentiate native versus non-native cover. Here's just that example I mentioned of the mid-story canopy. Look at the ovals. You can see the LiDAR is not showing much mid-story canopy, whereas on the left at the 50-foot station, field data suggested there was a 40% mid-story canopy, and then towards the left, between 250 to 280 feet, mid-story canopy estimated in the field was 70%. And as you can see from the LiDAR data, we're picking up almost no mid-story canopy. This suggests that the light penetration was being affected by the taller canopy and density of that canopy. Here's the case where the oval highlights the area where there's a dense willow thicket that apparently obscured and prevented the LiDAR from picking up a backwater channel. So what do we do about this? How do we improve? So for an overall canopy cover estimate, we're doing pretty good. But where we want finer vertical detail of the structure, we have some challenges. And what can we do about that? Well, one is trying to get higher density returns of LiDAR. Just maybe it was a situation where the LiDAR vendor could have done a better job, or maybe it met the technical specifications, but we need to increase what we're asking for. And that could be achieved also by increasing the overlap between the multiple passes of the plane and the LiDAR scanning, and as well as mixing. Or right now we're focusing mainly on directly above orthogonal laser scans, but maybe if we had more oblique scans as well from each side of the riparian corridor, we'd start picking up a lot more of that lower vertical structure. And then another option is to use modeling to try to reconstruct the vertical structure based on our assumptions about the distribution of returns versus the distance from the top of the canopy towards the ground surface, to account for that shading effect that might limit or block light penetration as the laser moves through the tree canopy and gets closer to the ground surface. And here's an example from prior studies that I've talked about at this conference, where we had high density research grade LiDAR collected by the National Center for Airborne Laser Mapping on the Santa Clara River in Southern California. In this case, they had 3 different lasers, each with a different wavelength, and gave us very high density returns. And this is an example where the LiDAR was doing quite a good job of picking up not only the upper canopy layers, but also all the way through down to the ground surface. Then here's another example from nearby where we have a different real canopy structure in the field. Basically 15-year-old willow tree recruits that all have a pretty even age stand. And you can see there appears to, the LiDAR data are showing pretty dense canopy layer near the top, and then structure, but less dense throughout. And then as you get near the ground surface, less vegetative structure. And that matches what we observed in the field. So we're doing a pretty good job there. So this is an indication that maybe there is something to do with just the quality or the density of the LiDAR, as well as perhaps the way they arrange the flight paths that might enable us to improve our results next time around. The other example of trying to improve our LiDAR results is shown here. In this case, we're, rather than having just biologists try to interpret this, we work with a statistician and use the raw LiDAR data returns to then reconstruct a hypothesized distribution of canopy density that accounts for that potential blockage of shading by the upper layers. And this this plot shows, one representation of that. You can see each line is at a different station, circular plot station along the transect, and where the black lines sort of jut out to the right there, we can see that that's an area with increased leaf density. So you get a sense from this plot of the vertical canopy structure. Here's another way of presenting those data. Basically to take that original LiDAR raw data returns and expand it using this hypothetical distribution of canopy density and multiple sampling then from that. And you can see it's giving us a little better picture of what that canopy structure might look like. And here's a more direct comparison. If you look at the bar on the right, that's from the farthest station to the east on the transect, and the arrow shows it's linked to the LiDAR data. The LiDAR picks up that taller canopy quite well, but as you can see, as you go down through the to the mid layer and below, the hypothetical distribution on the top indicates a greater leaf density than what we're actually seeing on the raw LiDAR returns. So to summarize, our standard LiDAR approach worked well for estimating canopy height, estimating total canopy cover, and estimating cover in the tree layer itself. We can also use standard LiDAR for capturing 3D vegetation structure in the more open areas, but we definitely are having problems in the denser areas of riparian forest. And as I mentioned, we can also use the LiDAR to generate a bare earth topographic surface like we've been doing for years, and that could serve as a high resolution base elevation that can be coupled with subsequent drone or UAV photography to track canopy height changes through time without having to repeat LiDAR at frequent intervals. And then on the right-hand side, we have a couple possible solutions to the problems or challenges we faced. As I mentioned, one is trying to develop custom technical specifications for higher density and maybe multiple swath and multiple angle LiDAR to solve some of those problem areas. And the other is, which we're beginning to explore, is combining LiDAR with multi or hyperspectral imagery to see if we can start teasing out differentiating native versus non-native vegetation, or ideally the holy grail would be to differentiate individual species. And with that, I'd just like to acknowledge the funding for Valley Water again, and the technical assistance from co-authors, and then Peter Baker, Aaron Elsey, Ian Pryor, and Carly Rodriguez at Stillwater Sciences. And I'd be happy to answer questions now. Thank you.